On June 10, 1944, 642 people walked into their village square in the French countryside. By sunset, every single one of them was dead. The entire village was burned to the ground, and here's what makes this even more chilling. For decades afterward, the French government left it exactly as it was found, a ghost town frozen in time. Bullet holes still scar the walls, rusted cars sit abandoned in the streets, and the skeleton of a church stands as a monument to what happened that day. This is the story of Oradour-sur-Glane, the village that vanished in World War II. What happened there is almost too horrific to believe. But this isn't just a story about the past, it's a warning about what humanity is capable of when hatred goes unchecked. Stay with me. Let me take you back to 1944, to a small village in southwestern France. Oradour-sur-Glane wasn't special in any particular way. It was a quiet place, home to about 330 residents. But on that particular June day, the population had swelled to over 600. Refugees from nearby areas had fled there, thinking it was a safe haven from the chaos of the war. Picture this: cobblestone streets winding between stone houses with red tile roofs, a tramway running right through the center of town. There were shops, a church, schools filled with children. It was the kind of idyllic place where everyone knew everyone: farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, kids playing in the streets. It was a community. BHE's point: the war had been raging across Europe for 5 long years. But there was a sense of hope in the air. D-Day had just happened 4 days earlier. On June 6, Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. The tide was finally turning against Nazi Germany, and everyone could feel it. Liberation was coming. For the people of Oradour, life had remained relatively peaceful. Of course, France was occupied. There were restrictions and hardships, but the village itself hadn't seen any major combat. It wasn't a hub of resistance activity. In fact, there was another town with an almost identical name, Oradour. Surveillos, just 25 kilometers away, and that town did have active resistance fighters. Some historians believe this simple, tragic similarity in names sealed Oradour-sur-Glane's fate. On the morning of June 10th, 1944, it was a Saturday. The sun was shining, the kids were in school, but looking forward to the weekend. People were going about their normal routines, shopping, talking, living. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day, but it would be anything but. What unfolded next was an act of unimaginable brutality, a scar left on the conscience of history. By the end of the day, this peaceful village would be transformed into a symbol of wartime atrocity, frozen in time as a permanent memorial to its lost souls. Imagine a quiet French village on a sunny afternoon. It's June 10th, 1944. Life in Oradour-sur-Glane is proceeding as normally as it can during wartime, but around 2 o'clock, that peace is utterly shattered. The terrifying rumble of trucks and armored vehicles fills the air. The infamous SS Das Reich Division, one of the most brutal units of the German military, has arrived. Soldiers immediately seal off the village, creating a perimeter that no one can escape. They begin to move from house to house, their orders sharp and unforgiving. Everyone, men, women, children, the old, the sickest, ordered into the central square. The excuse? A routine identity check. They claimed to be searching for hidden weapons and resistance fighters. The villagers, though scared, complied. What other choice did they have? Heavily armed soldiers were forcing them from their homes. Besides, these kinds of checks had happened before. Most believed it would be a brief, unpleasant interruption, and soon they'd be back in their homes. Refugees who had fled to Oradour for safety were herded into the square alongside the residents. Children were marched out of their classrooms, their lessons cut short. A woman visiting for the day was pulled from the tram she had just gotten off. People working in the fields, shopping in the stores, or resting in their homes were all rounded up. Soon, over 600 people stood packed together in the village square. There were 247 children, some just babies held tight in their mothers' arms. There were 105 men and 240 women. Whole families stood together, trying to comfort each other, completely unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. Then came the first truly chilling act. The SS soldiers began to separate the men from the women and children. The women and children were told they would be held in the village church for their safety, while the men were taken to be questioned. The men were then split into smaller groups and marched away to 6 different barns and sheds scattered around the edge of the village. even then, hope wasn't entirely lost. People clung to the belief that this was just a severe, but temporary, measure. They could not possibly imagine the truth, that the SS had no intention of questioning anyone. They had already decided that every single person in Oradour was going to die. What I'm about to describe is extremely difficult to talk about, but it's so important that we don't look away from history, no matter how dark it gets. Imagine a quiet village, just like any other. One day, soldiers arrive. The men of the village are separated and taken into barns. Suddenly, the soldiers open fire with machine guns, but they don't aim to kill immediately. They aim low, the legs and feet, making sure no one can escape. Then, they pile straw and wood on top of the wounded and set the barns on fire. Out of nearly 200 men, only 5 managed to escape. They crawled through the flames, broke through walls, and fled into the countryside, forever scarred by what they witnessed. But the true horror was unfolding at the village church. All the women and children were locked inside. The soldiers brought in a massive incendiary bomb and placed it in the center of the church. When it detonated, the building instantly filled with fire and toxic smoke. The women, in a desperate panic, tried to break through the windows and doors. But soldiers were waiting outside, shooting anyone who tried to get out. Mothers held their babies tight. Children screamed for their parents as the heat became unbearable and the smoke stole the air from their lungs. Then, the roof collapsed, crashing down on everyone inside. Only one woman survived. Her name was Marguerite Rufunch. She was 47 years old. She found a window behind the altar, climbed through, and jumped nearly 10 feet to the ground below. She was shot 5 times, but pretended to be dead among the bodies in the church garden until the soldiers finally left. Her survival is the only reason we know the full, horrifying truth of what happened inside that church. After the killings, the soldiers went through the village, systematically destroying everything. They looted homes, taking valuables, wine, food, anything they wanted. Then, they burned every single building to the ground. The entire village was set ablaze. Its ruins are preserved today as a permanent memorial. So why did this happen? What could possibly justify the slaughter of an entire village? The shocking truth is, there was no justification at all. The official reason the SS gave was that Oradour was a hotbed of resistance activity. They claimed weapons were hidden there and that a German officer had been kidnapped nearby by the resistance. But after the war, investigations completely debunked these claims. Oradour had no significant resistance presence, no weapons were ever found, and no German officer was kidnapped from that specific area. The most likely explanation is tragically simple. The SS got the wrong village. They were probably looking for Oradour surveys, a different town that did have known resistance connections. They just went to Oradour-sur-Glane by mistake. But even a mistake like that doesn't fully explain the sheer savagery of what happened next. We have to remember who these soldiers were. The SS Desseract Division had just come from the Eastern Front, where they had been involved in incredibly brutal anti-partisan warfare. They had become completely desensitized to violence, and had been conditioned to see all civilians as potential enemies. On top of that, they were under immense pressure. The D-Day invasion had just happened 4 days earlier, and they were scrambling to move north to fight the advancing Allies. Some historians think the massacre was a calculated act of terror, a brutal warning to the entire French population. Do not support the resistance, or this will happen to you too. Others believe it was simply an explosion of rage and revenge for the losses Germany was suffering in the war. It was a combination of mistaken identity, desensitized brutality, and vengeful fury that created this perfect storm of horror. When the war ended, the quest for justice was just as heartbreaking. Out of the hundreds of soldiers involved, only 21 were ever put on trial for the massacre. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Many of those on trial were Alsatians Frenchmen from the Alsace region, which had been annexed by Germany. They had been forcibly conscripted into the SS against their will. The trials were incredibly controversial. Some of the accused received death sentences, but these were later commuted. Others served only a few years in prison, and the man who actually ordered the attack SS Commander Adolf Dieck. He was killed in action in Normandy just 2 weeks after the massacre, so he never faced a judge. For the survivors, and for France, it felt like justice was never truly served. The ruins of Oradour-sur-Glane stand today as a silent. After the war, French President Charles de Gaulle visited the ruins of Oradour. What he saw there moved him to make a decision that would turn this small village into one of the most powerful war memorials in the world. He ordered that Oradour-sur-Glane would never be rebuilt. It would remain exactly as the SS left it, a permanent, chilling reminder of what happened there. And that's exactly what they did. If you visit Oradour today, you're not just visiting a museum. You're walking through a ghost town frozen in 1944. The burned-out shells of buildings still stand, open to the sky. You can see the rusted remains of the tram that was stopped at the fateful day. Its journey never completed. You can step into the skeletal remains of homes and see the ordinary objects of ordinary live-sewing machines, pots, pans, and even children's bicycles, all left exactly where they were when their owners were taken. The church still stands, its stone walls blackened by fire, the bullet holes still scarring its facade. Behind the altar, you can see the small window that Marguerite Ruffange, the sole survivor of the church massacre, managed to escape through. In the nearby cemetery, there's a single, massive tomb inscribed with 642 names. So many of the bodies were burned beyond recognition that entire families were simply buried together under one stone. A new village of Oradour was built just a short walk away, where life goes on. But the old village, the ruins that, belongs to history now. Over 300,000 people visit every year. School groups come from all across France. In fact, for many French students, it's a required visit. The government believes that if people can see what war really does, if they can walk through these actual ruins and understand that real families, real children died here, maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice before allowing history to repeat itself. At the entrance to the martyred village, there's a simple sign. It reads, "Remember." Just that one word. Because that's what this place is for. It's not about revenge or hatred. It's about memory. It's a stark, silent lesson that when we dehumanize others, when we let extremism and hatred guide our actions, this is the result. Villages burn. Children die. Families are destroyed. Marguerite Ruffange, the survivor from the church, lived until 1988. For decades, she tirelessly told her story. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to a place that feels frozen in time. A place that tells one of the most heartbreaking stories of World War II. We're talking about Oradour-sur-Glane in France. Imagine a quiet, peaceful village. People going about their day. Then, on June 10th, 1944, just 4 days after D-Day, everything changed forever. A division of the German SS entered Oradour. They claimed they were searching for a captured officer. But what happened next was not a search. It was a massacre. The soldiers rounded up all the men and shot them in barns. Then, they herded the women and children into the local church. They set it on fire. In just a few hours, 642 innocent people were killed, including over 200 children. The village was then systematically looted and burned to the ground. After the war, French President Charles de Gaulle made a powerful decision. He ordered that the original village of Oradour-sur-Glane should be left exactly as it was found, a permanent open-air memorial. The burnt-out cars, the crumbling walls, the sewing machines left in homes, all preserved. He called it a village martyr, a silent testament to the horrors of war. A new village was built right next to the ruins, a symbol of life continuing, but never forgetting. Walking through the ruins of Oradour today is an incredibly moving experience. You see the doctor's car, still parked where he left it. You see the charred remains of the church where so many lives were lost. It's not just a historical site, it's a grave. Each stone, each rusted bicycle, tells a story of a life cut short. It forces you to confront the human cost of hatred and violence, not as a statistic, but as a deeply personal tragedy. The village that vanished in World War II never really vanished at all. It's still there, in those ruins. It's still there in the stories passed down through generations. It's still there every time someone walks through those burned-out buildings and remembers that this actually happened. To real people in living memory, Oradour-sur-Glane is a reminder that the worst of humanity isn't some distant historical abstraction. It's real, it happened, and it could happen again if we're not vigilant. But it's also a reminder of resilience. A new village rose next to the old. Survivors rebuilt their lives, and today, that memorial stands as a testament that we remember, we honor those who died, and we commit to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. If this story affected you, I encourage you to share it. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts. History's darkest moments deserve to be remembered, not forgotten. Remember, I'll see you in the next video.